Today for Film Friday, we're going to go over a basic effect that I did for a music video a while back, which is replacing the screen on a cell phone that's flipped open. Now, I directed this video a while back, and one of the shots that they were wanting to get was a shot of a cell phone basically having a custom text on it. And when we were looking at it, they realized that they couldn't get this working. And so we decided that we were going to shoot it and have it be digital. So this is kind of my process to make it look like it's really in the screen, that it's matching the colors and everything. You can see a little bit of edge glow and designing this whole thing from scratch. So first of all, I knew that in After Effects, the thing that I wanted this text to be from was I wanted it to be from a different composition, because I wanted to be able to go in and change the text to say whatever I wanted to say. The client at the time, they didn't know exactly what they wanted the text to say, and it was something we wanted to be able to decide on a later date. So that is an insane text to end on. So let's just say, ha ha ha, try hard. Okay, so, and then if we go back here, boom, ha ha ha, try hard. So here's how I did it. I needed to make a composition that was a similar size to the text. So I kind of figured out the basic dimensions of it, and I decided to work off of it from there. So you can go here to hit new composition. I just did something like 300, and the height looks like not quite double. So let's just say 500. Okay. So that's essentially the composition. That's essentially what I did here, but I made the composition the size that I knew that the screen was supposed to be. This is a bit too long for me, but fortunately, I already have one right here. And if you ever are in doubt, you can check your composition settings by right-clicking and hitting Composition Settings. Here, I did it 1080 by 1500. I honestly forget why I chose to do that, but it seems to fit the screen pretty well. So let me go ahead and just get rid of all of this. Then the question becomes, how do you build something like that, right? So what I did is I found a picture essentially of a text bubble from a Razr phone specifically. The band I was working with, a lot of their things about like a lot of their themes and sort of branding is very nostalgic. So I wanted to be very true to what Razr phones actually look like. So I was able to find a picture of a Razr phone that was showing the text messages and how they actually looked. And from there I was like, oh, well, this would be pretty easy to make in After Effects then in the composition. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing is we need to have a background layer that everything can be built on top of. You know, I could have done like one red bar here, one red bar down here, but then I was like, well, we're going to cover it anyway. So let's just make one big red box. So if you go to Layer, New, you can do Solid. Doesn't really matter. We'll say background. And then you can click this eyedropper here and just click that. Boom. Done. Already pretty close to what this is. And if you ever did want to adjust the color here, you can always go to the effect controls. So it's actually fill. And then you can just have this color. So if you didn't like that initial color, you can always just go until it's close enough. Ooh, or like that right there. Boom. Okay. Step one, done. So we have these top edges and bottom edges. So what do we do after that? Well, let's work on creating this gradient here. Now this is awesome because it's very easy, right? It's just a little gradient. So we essentially just need to do the same thing. Layer. And then we'll just do a solid. Doesn't really matter what color it is. And from there, we're going to add a gradient ramp. Okay, so essentially we want to start with this blue color and go to this color, right? So let's grab the whites at the bottom already. So let's go ahead and just grab this and we'll select that. And then we'll go to the top dropper and we'll select that. Okay, so that's not quite what I was hoping for. So I'm going to get maybe a different. Yeah. Okay. So now we kind of have our gradient here. Looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and squash this a bit. Doing this. Okay. And then we have the top and the bottom, just like our reference image. Now, you'll also see that there is this gradient kind of going the other way. Well, what's awesome about that is you can just go click on this layer and hit Command D, boom, duplicated, and then you can hit rotate and then say 90. And then you can just grab this and move it on to right here. Pull in this reference image again. Look at that. We'll go out to our bigger text layer. This is where our video is stored. We're going to be tracking it. And then we'll grab this composition and we're going to add a couple of effects. Two of the key ones being posterize and mosaic. So what posterize does is it's in reference to color. Essentially, it's what happens when you get this banding. You can kind of see here, which is a very like natural thing to see with older screens because they couldn't handle the higher def stuff. After the posterizing, which honestly, like I probably should have done this before, is adding mosaic. Now, mosaic is also sort of color-based, but it's in a form of blocks. So it's summing up the color information into pixels. And for this, if I dropped both of these to 10, you'll really see the size of them, right? So it's a 10 by 10 square. And as I increase it, we're going to get higher definition. Okay, so I found that the sweet spot is about 150. So the screen is pretty much done. Not too many more effects going on. But the question is now, how do we place it in the shot? How do we get it to look like it's in the phone? Well, for this case, I did add tracker points, but I very quickly realized that they're not good. That they were not going to be useful. So you can kind of see them here, but the problem is they're very blurry. And this is something I learned that when you're doing effects like this or green screen or anything where you're superimposing two shots, it's almost always good rule of thumb to have your shutter speed and your frame rate be pretty decently high, because you can always add like motion blur and things like that in post. If that's the footage you're trying to edit on top of, it's really hard to make this. And it just doesn't, it's really, really hard to match that. So you'll see here, like my thing is pretty imperfect. And you can see like there is definitely motion blur here. And that's one thing I love about After Effects, is turning on the motion blur can really sell that effect. You can do that by grabbing this and turning it on here. And then basically, if you have any sort of recorded motion, it's going to detect the point A to point B and calculate what that motion blur is supposed to look like. So honestly, After Effects motion blur is like pretty, I'm a fan of it. It's pretty solid. So how did I attach it to the corners? Well, the answer is very painstakingly. I went through every single frame. I put a plugin called CC Power Pin. It's a built-in After Effects thing. And what that does is basically it takes your image and you can grab the corners of it, right? And you can take those corners and you can pin it to the corners of your phone. So let's say there's that right there. The phone is coming out like that. Okay. So essentially what I did is I took those pins and I went frame by frame and manually set where they should be relative to the phone. Now you can see it's a little jumbly. It's not perfect, but at the end of the day, you know, this is a less than second long shot, and it does the job. So now you take your footage, you duplicate it, you put it on top of the composition, and then what you do, you can grab something like this. For this, I believe I literally just grabbed a sphere, essentially, and I went frame by frame. I went that, and then you can go to the mask, and you can hit mask path to animate it, and go to the next frame, boom. Okay, and then after that, it's not even in front of the screen anymore, so we can take this footage and we can hit Option and then close bracket, and it'll just delete it after that. So now it's cutting out the thumb. It's looking even better than before. Obviously there's ways you can finesse it. In fact, one of my favorite ways and easiest way is just adding a little bit of a feather. That's gonna sell that so much better. And there we have it. That's how you set it all up. And the beautiful thing is, because we set it up that way, we can go into this text part and we can make it say anything. We love Gavin's tutorials. And then we go, boom. That's my favorite thing about After Effects, is all these nested compositions and the ease at which you can do this. So the final thing I added to this composition to give it the that little extra sauce is getting these colors to kind of bleed over the edge. So a way I did that was I added glow. I honestly didn't do too much to the glow, but the big thing is of compositing it on top versus behind. I think the standard is it does behind, which gives you, it's just so blown out, and it just like isn't super friendly. So I just added on top, so we get these like outer edge glows, but we're still getting all this readability. You're getting this upper edge glow. And then I also did actually take the hue and saturation and I turned the saturation down because as you can see, the rest of the footage is just really not that saturated. And so I knew that as I would have had to gone to color the whole thing, I wanted this to kind of match the lack of saturation here. So when I did the final shot, it was all colored nice and correctly. But yeah, that's how I did that. Pretty simple, but it does have a lot of moving parts and a lot of teeny tiny little tricks to make it look good. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found that really useful. If you did, please feel free to subscribe. I will be putting out way more content around After Effects, special effects, all that stuff. I've done a lot for music videos for people around town. I've also worked with a lot of artists around town in helping their creative ideas come to life. I hope that that was useful for you guys, and I'll see you guys next week.